Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Danica Rowe, and for 7 years I believed my husband and I were building a life that would outlast any hard season. I worked 12-hour nursing shifts at Jefferson, came home with aching feet, and still sat at the kitchen table quizzing Damon for his licensing exams because he said the promotions he wanted would change our future. When his father died during our 3rd year of marriage, I handled the funeral calls while he sat numb on the sofa with his head in my lap. When he got laid off 2 years later, I picked up extra weekend shifts and told him it was temporary, that one setback did not define a man. We talked about children in the quiet, serious way married people do when they think the future belongs to them. We had a jar in the cabinet filled with baby names and neighborhood lists. I thought loyalty counted because I had lived it every day. That was why the sight of him standing in our bedroom on a Thursday afternoon, folding his shirts into a suitcase I had never seen before, felt less like an argument and more like the floor opening under me. The suitcase was dark brown leather, expensive enough that I knew he had not bought it on impulse. It gleamed in the bedroom light while he packed with the calm focus of a man catching a flight he had prepared for all week. Half the closet was empty. His cuff links were gone from the dresser. The framed wedding photo that usually sat on his nightstand had been turned face down and shoved into the wastebasket. "When did you buy that?" I asked because some foolish part of me still wanted the answer to be harmless. Damon did not look up. "Last week," he said. I needed something professional. I stood there in my scrubs holding the takeout bag I had bought to celebrate his first day at a new job, and I felt my own voice shrink. "Please look at me," I said. "Please just tell me what is happening." He finally turned. There was no softness in his face, no fear, not even guilt. "I'm leaving," he said. "I do not want to be married anymore." I remember laughing once in disbelief because 6 months earlier we had toured an open house in Chestnut Hill and argued over whether the smaller bedroom should be a nursery or an office. "Whatever is wrong, we can fix it," I said. "We can go to counseling." He zipped the suitcase. "There is nothing to fix. I started my new position today. New title, new salary, new circles. I need to be with someone who fits that life." Then he showed me a photo on his phone. A beautiful black woman with polished hair, a white blazer, and the kind of smile people practice for rooms full of investors. "Her name is Nicole," he said. "She understands where I'm headed." He said they had been seeing each other for 4 months, and he said it with the flat efficiency of a man reviewing a calendar, not confessing an affair to his wife. I followed him into the living room because my body had not yet caught up with what my mind was hearing. "I supported you through every rejection letter," I said. "I paid the rent when you were unemployed. I sat with you while you studied. How can you stand there and tell me I do not fit your life?" Damon gripped the suitcase handle and avoided my eyes for the first time. "I appreciate what you did," he said, "but I've outgrown this. My attorney will send divorce papers. You can keep the apartment until the lease ends. That gives you time to find something you can afford." He had already moved his important documents, already opened a separate bank account, already planned the whole exit. When he reached the door, I said, "Do not do this to us." He paused, and for one breath I thought I saw hesitation. Then it vanished. "Goodbye, Danica," he said, and closed the door with a soft click. 10 minutes later I got a text. "I'm blocking your number. Any communication goes through lawyers now." Then my banking app sent an alert. Our joint checking account had been closed. By the time I logged in, he had withdrawn everything except $183. 3 days later the divorce papers arrived by courier. Damon wanted the marriage dissolved quickly. No spousal support, no meaningful division of assets, no delay. He claimed the marriage had been broken for more than a year. I read that sentence twice, staring at words that erased our last year together. A year earlier, he had been asleep against my shoulder while we compared fertility insurance coverage on my laptop. The call that changed everything came while those papers were still spread across my kitchen table. The number was unfamiliar, Seattle area code, and I almost ignored it. A man introduced himself as Harold Benton, an attorney handling the estate of my mother's older sister, Eleanor Price. Aunt Eleanor was not a complete stranger, which was part of why the call did not feel ridiculous. After my mother died, her office had mailed me a sympathy card and a short note saying Eleanor had tried for years to find a respectful way back into the family after a bitter inheritance dispute with my grandparents. We exchanged 2 guarded letters over the next year. Eleanor sent me one birthday card with a line that said, "When you are ready, I would like to know the woman you became." I had written back once, meaning to call later when life calmed down. Harold's voice was careful when he told me she had suffered a stroke 6 weeks earlier and died before the meeting her office had been arranging with me. He also told me I was her primary beneficiary. "How much are we talking about?" I asked. "The current estimate is a little over $26 million, he said, split across investment accounts, trust assets, and property interests. He explained that Eleanor had built wealth as one of the few Black women investing early in medical software and logistics companies, that most of the estate would remain in trust, and that because probate filings would soon become visible, discretion mattered. Then he said, "Ms. Price left a letter requesting that any inheritance you receive be protected from anyone who has mistreated you or may try to profit from you." I told Harold the truth. My husband had left 3 days earlier, emptied our joint account, and filed for divorce. He did not make promises that sounded magical. He said, "In Pennsylvania, inheritances are generally treated as separate property if they are kept separate and not commingled, but your divorce attorney needs to handle disclosure carefully. Do not deposit anything into a joint account. Do not sign anything without counsel. And do not tell your husband." That precision steadied me. I called out of work. Then I called the divorce firm Harold recommended. The receptionist transferred me to Patrice Holloway, whose voice carried the clipped calm of somebody who did not waste outrage on men she intended to beat in court. "Bring every bank statement, every credit card bill, every email, every tax return," she said. "If he has been planning this, he left a trail." While I was still on the phone, another message came through from an unknown number. "Heard you and Damon split. I know transitions can be hard financially. Let me know if you need help. Nicole." She had the nerve to text me with fake sympathy while wearing the life she had helped him steal. Patrice heard the silence on my end and said, "Mistress?" I said yes. "Good," she said. "People who think they have won are usually sloppy." Patrice's office overlooked Center City, but she was the kind of Black woman who made the skyline feel like office decor rather than power. She read Damon's filing once and set it down. "He did you one favor," she said. He showed his hand early. She did not tell me my inheritance was untouchable, because she was a real lawyer, not a movie character. She told me what was likely, what had to be disclosed, what must remain separate, and what mistakes could ruin those protections. Then she pointed to the line where Damon claimed the marriage had been irretrievably broken for more than a year. "He is trying to establish narrative," she said. "We are going to establish facts." She had already ordered preliminary records and found that Damon had changed mailing addresses for 3 credit cards, set up a post office box in South Philadelphia, and redirected statements there. She also found something uglier. Damon's old employer-sponsored health plan had ended when he left that job. During our marriage, we had agreed that once his new benefit started, he would add me because one of my prescriptions was expensive without insurance. He completed his enrollment paperwork as employee only and said nothing. We spent 2 hours rebuilding the last year of my marriage in spreadsheets and memory. Damon's late networking dinners. The weekends he said he was at certification workshops. The extra caution around his phone. The sudden interest in keeping our expenses tighter, while I covered groceries and he claimed he was saving for our future. Before I left, Patrice gave me 3 instructions. Do not tell Damon about Seattle, do not answer emotional bait, and send her every contact from him or Nicole. The evidence did not arrive in one dramatic pile. It came the way truth usually does, in pieces that first look irritating and then horrifying when you line them up. Patrice hired a forensic accountant named Veronica Shaw. She started with the joint account Damon drained and worked outward. Over a week, she found recurring cash withdrawals that added up to more than $40,000 over 2 years, a secret savings account with $58,000 in it, and a personal loan he had taken out in the name of home improvements that never touched our apartment. Merchant records tied chunks of that money to a jewelry store on Walnut Street, a boutique hotel in Washington, District of Columbia, and a luxury apartment deposit. She found Nicole's social media photos from a weekend Damon had sworn he spent at a compliance seminar in Baltimore. The most damaging proof came from technology Damon had forgotten I understood. Years earlier, I had linked our home tablet to a shared family email for bills and grocery lists. When I checked the settings after Patrice told me to audit every device, I found an auto-forwarding rule sending all emails with the words estate, trust, attorney, or probate to a hidden address. Damon had not guessed about my money. He had read Harold's messages through an account he had quietly manipulated before he moved out. Patrice's eyes went cold when she saw it. "Good," she said. "Now when he shows up pretending he suddenly misses you, we will know exactly why." He came to my door with white lilies and a practiced face 4 days later. I had my phone recording before I unlocked the deadbolt. Damon smiled when I opened the door, but his eyes skimmed past me into the apartment the way a burglar checks a room. "You look tired," he said softly. "I hate that this is what I did to you." I kept the door half closed. "Why are you here?" He lifted the flowers. "To talk. I made a mistake. Nicole is not who I thought she was." I almost laughed. "There is no reason to talk," I said. "Your lawyer made that clear." He inhaled and tried tenderness. "I was under pressure. New job, new expectations. I got caught up in something stupid. But you and I, what we built, that is real. We can fix this." For days earlier, I would have broken apart hearing those words. Standing there with proof of his forwarded emails and our emptied bank account, I heard only calculation. "When did you decide you missed me?" I asked. "Before or after you started reading my private emails?" For the first time, he actually flinched. "I do not know what you mean." "You know exactly what I mean." His expression hardened by degrees. "Danica, do not let people fill your head with nonsense. Whatever money you think is coming, do not be stupid about this. We are still legally married." There it was. Not remorse. Not love. Inventory. I said, "You did not come back for me. You came back because you think there is something to take." He dropped the act completely. "You would have nothing without me," he said. "You are a nurse. Be realistic." My grief burned off so fast it startled me. "Leave," I said. "And if you contact me again except through counsel, I will use every legal option I have." I called building security while he was still on the hall carpet, and after he left I sent the recording straight to Patrice. Seattle did not feel like a dream when I got there. It felt like paperwork, signatures, grief for a woman I had barely known, and the strange ache of learning I had been loved from a distance. Harold met me with boxes of letters and a binder full of trust documents. Aunt Eleanor's estate was large, but not absurd. Market accounts, private holdings, property, and a trust already funded for legal and professional support if I ever needed to protect myself after receiving it. The smartest part of her planning was not the money. It was the structure. Most of the inheritance would sit in a spendthrift trust with an independent trustee. A separate account was available immediately for living expenses, legal fees, and relocation if my divorce required it. Another fund had been carved out specifically for future work that protects vulnerable women from financial coercion. Her final letter explained what Harold had only hinted at. My mother had cut off the entire Seattle side of the family after a bitter fight over my grandparents' care and some property that brought out the worst in everyone. Eleanor respected my mother's wishes while I was a child, then kept hesitating once I was grown because she did not want her reappearance to feel like a power move from a wealthy relative. "I waited too long to be brave in the right direction," she wrote. "Do not repeat that mistake in your own life." I read those letters in a hotel room overlooking Elliott Bay while my phone kept buzzing with updates from Philadelphia. Damon had filed an emergency motion accusing me of hiding assets and requesting full forensic disclosure. Nicole sent another message from a new number saying, "He told me you are trying to trick him with some fake family money story. You are embarrassing yourself." Patrice told me not to respond, and this time I listened perfectly. She also hired an information security consultant who traced Damon's email forwarding trick and preserved the rule, access logs, and login locations before he could wipe them. That discovery changed the divorce strategy. It also explained how quickly he had shown up with flowers. Patrice called me from her office on my second day in Seattle. "He built his own trap," she said. "He accessed estate communications he had no right to see, then tried to leverage them to reconcile. The court will care very much about unauthorized access and bad faith filings." Before I flew home, Harold put Eleanor's letters in a hard-sided archive box and handed it to me like a family heirloom. "Your aunt believed the worst mistake people make with money is using it to prove something to the people who hurt them," he said. "Use it instead to make yourself harder to harm." Back in Philadelphia, Veronica's report turned suspicion into chronology. Damon had not started planning his exit the day he met Nicole. He had started at least 18 months earlier, when he began moving small amounts of money into the secret account and lowering his visible balance at home, so every purchase I wanted would feel irresponsible. He trained me to accept less while he built leverage elsewhere. The report showed that he and Nicole had upgraded their affair in stages. Dinners first, then hotel charges, then apartment scouting, then a luxury lease she could not have qualified for without him. It also found something criminal, not merely cruel. Damon had opened one credit card in my name using my social security number and a mailing address tied to his post office box. He kept the balance low enough and the payments current enough that I would not notice right away. By the time Veronica traced it, nearly $19,000 had been spent. Patrice did not promise a dramatic arrest. She said, "This gives us grounds to file a police report and to seek protections in family court. The criminal case, if it comes, will take its own course." I sat with a detective for almost 2 hours, turned over the report, the email forwarding records, and copies of messages from Damon and Nicole, and answered questions until my throat hurt. By midnight, I had wiped my face, organized tomorrow's exhibits, and written myself a sentence on a yellow legal pad. He planned for me to break. I am not going to give him that satisfaction. The first major hearing happened in family court, not some grand marble courtroom, but a plain room with fluorescent lighting, and a judge who looked like she had heard every version of male entitlement available in English. Judge Lenora Whitfield denied Damon's emergency motion within 20 minutes because it was speculative, unsupported, and transparently strategic. Patrice disclosed the existence of a separate inheritance in the narrow way the rules required, then argued exactly what she had told me in private. Inheritances are generally non-marital in Pennsylvania if kept separate. I had received no distributions into marital accounts. Damon's own misconduct made his fishing expedition especially offensive. Then she introduced the drained joint account, the hidden savings, the affair spending, the employee-only insurance election, the unauthorized forwarding rule, and the card in my name. Damon's attorney tried to frame it all as marital confusion after a breakup. Patrice did not raise her voice once. "Confusion does not open a credit line with your wife's social security number," she said. Damon spoke only once, and badly. He claimed he had taken the money because he assumed I would become emotional and vindictive. Judge Whitfield stared at him long enough for the room to feel embarrassed on his behalf. We did not get every remedy that day because real courts move in pieces, but we got enough. Temporary sole responsibility for the card debt tied to his affair, a freeze on certain account movements, an order preserving electronic evidence, reimbursement proceedings on the drained joint funds, and a strict no-contact provision outside counsel. As we stepped into the hallway, Damon finally looked at me with naked panic. He was not seeing his wife anymore. He was seeing the end of a strategy. The divorce itself resolved over the next 2 months through settlement conferences and the pressure of evidence Damon could not explain away. Once his attorney understood that Patrice could prove dissipation of marital assets, hidden savings, unauthorized account activity, and improper access to private communications, the swagger disappeared from their filings. Damon ended up with what he had asked for in the broadest sense: a fast divorce, no claim to my inheritance, and a clean break. What he did not get was the profit he had expected from that break. He had to repay my share of the drained account, assume the bulk of the debt tied to Nicole, surrender half of the hidden savings as marital property, and reimburse a meaningful portion of my legal and forensic costs. Nicole lasted another 6 weeks. I know that because she called me once furious. To say Damon had lied to her about his finances and his crazy ex had ruined everything. I remember leaning against my kitchen counter, hearing in her voice that she was angry not because he had betrayed me, but because his collapse had interrupted her plans. "Then you should take that up with him," I said, and hung up. By the end of the month, she had moved out of the place he helped lease and scrubbed him from her photos. The affair that had supposedly been about ambition and compatibility dissolved into unpaid bills and public embarrassment. When the divorce became final, Harold released the first substantial distributions from Eleanor's trust into accounts that had never touched my marriage. I did not buy a mansion or a car with a red ribbon on the hood. The first thing I bought was sleep. I moved into a quiet row house in Mount Airy with an office, a small backyard, and a kitchen big enough for dinner with friends. Then I started building what Eleanor had envisioned, and what my marriage had taught me was desperately needed. With a seed budget small enough to stay grounded and large enough to matter, I hired developers and compliance consultants to build a financial monitoring platform for women going through separation, divorce, or coercive relationships. It started with simple tools: credit alerts, shared account tracking, document storage, and plain language guides about insurance, property, and common forms of hidden debt. I called it Safeguard because that was what I had been denied in my own home. In parallel, I set up a modest grant fund through Eleanor's trust for emergency retainers, forensic reviews, and short-term housing for women dealing with financial abuse. None of it felt glamorous. Most of it felt like long meetings, user testing, nonprofit law, and the humbling experience of learning how much I did not know. But every time a woman wrote to say she had caught a secret loan, stopped a fraudulent application, or finally understood what questions to ask her own lawyer, I felt something inside me settle into purpose. Success did not arrive in one clean sunrise. It came with bad hires, missed deadlines, product revisions, and the disorienting experience of people suddenly calling me visionary when a year earlier my husband had told me I would never be more than a tired nurse with bills. I still worked 2 shifts a month at the hospital because it kept me anchored. Safeguard grew because the need was real. Women did not need inspiration nearly as much as they needed systems, records, warnings, and someone to tell them the strange thing in their marriage might have a name. The criminal investigation against Damon moved slower than my life did. Detectives subpoenaed records. The district attorney reviewed the identity theft file and the email access evidence. Damon lost his job before formal charges were even filed because his employer learned about the financial misconduct during background follow-up related to the court orders. He went online after that and posted a bitter monologue about false accusations and a vindictive ex-wife who could not accept being left. Patrice sent the screenshots to my security consultant and the prosecutor. I did not answer. That silence enraged him more than any speech could have. For months he tried to pull me back into the story by being loud enough that I would have to respond. I refused. The more I built, the more pathetic his noise sounded, and I think that was the first time he began to understand a truth he had never imagined. He had not merely failed to destroy me. He had removed himself from the life that would have included me. Damon eventually took a plea. There was no dramatic jury verdict, no judge delivering a speech about morality while cameras flashed. There was a conference room, a prosecutor with a stack of records, a defense attorney trying to contain the damage, and a plea agreement that required Damon to admit he had used my identifying information without authorization, accessed communications that were not his, and continued contact after court restrictions were in place. He received probation, restitution, mandatory counseling, and financial penalties that ate whatever shine remained on the upgraded life he had left for. Patrice called me after the hearing and said, "It is done." I sat at my desk staring at the city through my office window and expected fireworks inside myself. Instead, I felt tired. Not defeated, not bitter. Just finished. Damon had built his betrayal around certainty. He had been certain I would crumble without him, certain the mistress would validate him, certain the system would be too slow or too indifferent to matter, certain he could manage the story if he stayed one step ahead. In the end, his consequences were not cinematic. They were administrative, financial, reputational, and relentless. He had a record. He had debt. He had lost the job he used to measure his worth. He had watched the woman he chose over me leave the minute the numbers stopped flattering her. None of that gave me joy. But it gave shape to something I needed badly: proportion. What he had done was not a misunderstanding between spouses. It was a plan, and plans have outcomes. The reckoning that stayed with me did not happen in court. It happened almost a year after the day he left, on a Thursday evening at the hospital. I was finishing a shift when I saw Damon in the emergency department waiting area with his arm in a sling and a bruise spreading across his cheekbone. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically smaller but stripped of theater. No tailored suit. No polished arrogance. Just a man in a wrinkled shirt staring at a television he was not really watching. When he saw me, he stood halfway and then seemed to realize he did not know what rights he had to my attention anymore. I kept my voice professional. "The triage nurse will call you," I said. He swallowed and nodded. "Danica," he said. "Could I have 1 minute?" I should have kept walking, but something in his face told me this was not another performance. We stood near the vending machines under unforgiving fluorescent lights, the most ordinary setting imaginable. He looked at the floor when he spoke. "I used to think losing the job was the worst part," he said. "Then losing the apartment. Then Nicole leaving. Then the case. I kept blaming each new thing. But that was not the worst part." He finally looked at me. The worst part was realizing you were the one person who knew me before any of that mattered. You loved me when I was broke, angry, embarrassed, and still trying to become somebody. And I traded that for attention. For a second I saw not my husband, not my enemy, but the exact man I should have recognized sooner. Deeply hungry, deeply weak, and finally unable to hide from himself. I did not comfort him. I did not punish him either. You did not lose me in the courtroom, I said. You lost me long before that, when you decided my loyalty was something you could spend. He shut his eyes. I kept going because he needed the truth more than mercy. You emptied our account. You read my private emails. You planned an exit while I was still working extra shifts to support you. Nicole did not make you betray me. Money did not make you betray me. Opportunity just exposed what was already in you. He nodded once, hard, like each sentence landed where it belonged. I know, he said. That is what I finally know. There was a long silence between us, broken only by a monitor alarm somewhere behind the doors. Then he said the one thing I think he had been carrying like a wound. I do not think I ever understood what I had until I watched what you built without me. That was the line, sharper than any judge's ruling, because it proved he understood the material loss and the personal one at the same time. He had not merely lost access to money. He had lost a woman who would have stood beside him through an ordinary life and made it rich in all the ways that never show up on paper. I hope you build something honest from here, I said. Not for me. For yourself. Because this cannot be the end of the person you are. He looked at me with a kind of grief I no longer shared. Did you ever hate me? He asked. For a while, I said. Then I got busy living. When the nurse called his name, I walked away before he could ask for anything else. That night I drove home to the row house. Eleanor's money had not bought so much as protected. The lights were on in the kitchen. My laptop was open to product notes. A half-finished grant proposal sat on the table. The life waiting for me was not glamorous, and that was exactly why I loved it. It was mine. A little later, Micah Bennett, a black surgeon I had been quietly dating for 3 months, knocked on the door with takeout and a patient smile because he knew I had worked late. He did not ask why my eyes looked thoughtful until we were halfway through dinner, and I told him I had seen Damon. Micah listened without interrupting, then reached across the table and squeezed my hand once. Are you okay? He asked. I looked around at the room, at the papers for a foundation board meeting, at the phone buzzing with a message from one of our users thanking Safeguard for helping her catch a fraudulent loan application before it ruined her credit, at the ordinary tenderness of a man who never made my pain compete with his ego. Yes, I said, and I meant it completely. Seeing Damon had not reopened anything. It had closed it. The man who walked out with the leather suitcase thought he was leaving behind something small and stepping into something better. By the time he understood what he had really thrown away, I was already gone in every way that mattered. That was the sharpest ending of all. He finally understood who he had lost, and I no longer needed him to. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.